Welcome guys, and we are on the 14th game of Kasparov's masterpieces. Kasparov plays white and black is Vladimir Kramnik. Both are from Russia, and the game is played in Lord Novgorod Super Tournament in Novgorod, Russia in August 94. The opening is Sicilian defense, Sveshnikov variation. Well, the lesson of the game is navigating the opening labyrinth. Uh, the important psychological battles take place in the opening phase of the game. An example is transposition, when a player reaches a known opening position by some unusual path. At each move, both players have to steer the game into prepared lines that are part of their opening repertoire. Uh, okay, let's go through the game. Okay, the game goes as e4, c5, knight c3. Here, this move is far less common than usual knight f3. It can lead to close Sicilian variations. And knight c6. Placing the knight at c6 rules out several popular lines in the Sicilian and limits black's choices to just 4 of the systems. And knight ge2. This is known as the chameleon variation. White still refuses to disclose the main plan. There are two logical continuations. White can play g3, returning to the closed Sicilian, or he can play d4. And knight f6. This is the most flexible move. d4, and after cd4, knight takes d4, and e5. Now knight db5, d6, bishop g5, a6, knight a3, b5. Evgeny Sveshnikov polished this plan into major Sicilian weapon, and it is known as the Sveshnikov variation. Guys, don't confuse it with the Skamenningen variation. They are very different. In this case, the pawn is at e5 and not at e6, and there is a hole at d5. White has two major plans here. The knight can go to d5 immediately, or white can capture the knight and then occupy d5. Knight d5, bishop e7, and bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, c3, and white prevents the black's b pawn from advancing, and now and also a post at c2 for the knight, and after castling knight c2. This position has been reached more than 2000 times. It is an excellent choice for a battle of preparation. Rook b8. The point of this move is to remove the rook from the a file, so that when white plays a4, a potential pin on the a file won't complicate complicate the pressure on b5. In addition, the pawn at b5 gets more support. h4. Kasparov is not a fan of standard moves uh, like bishop e2. The h pawn is offered as I'm sorry. Yes, the h pawn is offered as a sacrifice, though only a fool would accept it. Uh, knight e7. Kramnik chooses the sharpest and most controversial variation. Bishop takes h4 is met by queen h5 when the bishop can't retreat. Knight takes f6, g takes f6. And now queen d2. And Kasparov enjoys opposite wing castling in the Sicilian. I'm sorry here. Yes, queen d2, and before that there is bishop, and then bishop b7, then bishop d3. The bishop aims at the weak e4 pawn. F3 should not be played here, and after d5, this is the major goal for black in the Sicilian. ed5, queen d5, and long castles, e4 and bishop e2, then queen takes a2. There is a bit of risk here. The queen can't really attack because the knight at c2 defends against the threat of check at a1, and the queen is far away from the king's side. Still, it is the best move in this position. Queen takes d2 is a poor choice because after rook takes d2 and rook fd8 and rook hd1, white has a very strong game thanks to the better pawn structure and control of the d file. Queen h6, queen e6, knight d4, queen b6, black might be able to do better, and queen e5 keeps the queen centralized. If at all queen e5 is played, then there is f4, then ef3 and bishop d3, knight g6 and g3, bishop e4, bishop e4, and after bishop takes c4, queen takes e4. This will lead to a draw. Here instead of bishop takes e4, rook e1 is correct. Then but the queen goes to queen b6. Kramnik plays queen b6, then rook. Kasparov lifts his rook. It is also possible to organize an attack using pawn storm supported by rook at g7, g1. G1. And after king h8, bishop g4, and rook g8. This game had a great impact on the theory of Shershnikov's Sicilian. Knight e6. This is shown as a blunder by the computer because now rook g6 is coming. After that, queen f4 and bishop d5, bishop d5, and knight d4 and b4 and b3 and rook. So, but Kasparov plays knight e6. It would have been better to place the bishop at e6. In the later analysis, it was found that this will be met by rook g6, and then rook g6, and then queen f4, and then f takes e6, and queen takes b8 is coming, rook g8, and queen h2 is coming. So, but Kasparov plays knight e6. And after rook g6, queen f4. Now rook e8, rook e8. Here the computer shows the best move was bishop d5. If at all bishop d5, then knight g5, then knight g5, then after f takes g5, there is queen e5 check, and then queen e5 check. Now rook g7 and queen takes e7. And when black has the discovered attack f5, f5, then queen e5, f takes g4, and threatens the rook at h3. But if the rook retreats, Kramnik would have to save the bishop at d5 and be a piece ahead. So there is no alternative to rook takes d5. Rook takes d5, g takes h3, and rook d7, rook rook d7. Oh yeah, rook d7 and rook bg8 and rook takes d7, rook takes g7 and queen e8 check, rook g8 and queen e5 with a draw. And now rook g6, queen f4, rook e8, and Kramnik makes a blunder. He should have put bishop d5, and after rook d6, and this is another use of queen f4, and after knight d5, Kramnik takes aim at the queen and adds support to the pawn at f6. If white dares to capture the pawn at e4, the queen will be exposed to a discovered attack and the knight moves. So Kramnik expected the queen to retreat, but Kasparov played the killer move h5. And after knight, now the sacrifice can't really be refused. So after knight takes f4, because if the rook retreats to g8, the pawn at f6 can easily be deprived of its defender. After rook takes d5, f takes e6, and queen takes f6 check, rook g7, and there is rook d7, rook eg8, h6. So the queen has to be taken here, and after h takes g6, here white has given up the queen for and a pawn for a rook, and black has a choice of capturing the rook at d6 or the knight at e6, or the rook at h3, the pawn at g6 and pawn at g2. But Kasparov knew that he would win in any case. The attack is overpowering. And after queen takes d6, rook takes h7 check, king g8, g takes f7, king takes h7, f takes e8 queen, and knight takes e6. And here Kasparov unveils his plan: bishop f5 check, and king g7, queen g6 check, and king f8, queen takes f6 check, king e8, bishop takes e6, queen f8, bishop d7 check, and Kramnik resigned here. Okay guys, I hope you would have enjoyed the game, and it was very illustrative, and the comments were very long. I'll meet you in the next game between Kasparov and Vishy Anand, played in the World Championship match in New York City in 1995. Thank you all.